Let's talk about these most recent rulings, what they mean, plus the elephant in the room the state wants you to forget. All that being said, everything's alleged. Welcome to the point. Let's get to it. A lot of people are reading these rulings and saying this is bad for the state, good for the state, bad for the defense, or good for the defense. And I don't necessarily see it that way. Anyone talking about these motions in terms of what's good or bad is talking about it wrong in my own unprofessional opinion. If your interest is justice and the pursuit of justice and transparency and understanding what happened that night, then these rulings are an absolute win. For example, Dylan's testimony. The defense wants to say she's not credible and she shouldn't take the stand because of what she did prior to this particular attack. While the state is saying she's a witness, she saw the suspect, she saw the bushy eyebrows. She should 100% be able to testify to what she saw that night. Because credible or not, she saw something. Now, if the state wants to roll the dice and bring a witness up there to say she saw something that she believes she saw, while fully knowing she was blasted to the gills, then so be it. It's their case. She did see and hear things. We don't know exactly what she saw or heard, and neither does she. So she's not going to be a credible witness, but that's still a piece of the story that absolutely needs to come in. But before we get to the elephant in the room, let's talk about some of this vague testimony and what this means. The Barnharts are digital specialists with Celebrite who were retained by law enforcement to analyze defendant's cell phone and PC to determine user behavior and actions. They are disclosed to opine that the gaps in data on the two devices were abnormal. Attached to the disclosures is a report jointly authored by the Barnharts detailing their analysis and findings. Their CVs were provided as well. Defendant argues that the disclosures indicate they will testify to habit evidence, which he complains is not explained and is not accompanied by any opinions. Defendant's challenge is confusing. Nowhere do the disclosures or the report indicate the Barnharts will testify about habit evidence. Rather, the disclosures state that they will testify to their findings pertaining to the defendant's activities on his PC and cell phone for a period of time before and after the attacks and why gaps in data over that period of time are abnormal. The Barnharts' opinions regarding these topics are fully set forth in their joint report. For example, they observed a gap in the defendant's school PC that may be consistent with cleaning up or using anti-forensic methods to clear evidence. And there's a lot of people making assumptions here. For example, I caught one other channel making the assumption that Bryan had Googled the address before the attacks became known, and this is him trying to hide that evidence or delete that evidence. Now, I'm not on here to say that anybody's sources are incorrect or wrong and that I'm right. I'm just saying if you're not going to cite your sources, I'm not going to believe what you're saying. Listen, you can't on one hand tell me Bryan Googled the Idaho 4 before the Idaho 4 became public, and on the other hand show me a court document where these individuals are going to say large portions of his data have been erased. That just doesn't make sense to me. Now, if that evidence exists and it exists, it should come out in trial and everybody should see it. But if that evidence doesn't exist, a lot of people are reaching here. Does this mean Bryan committed this crime? I mean, honestly, it really depends on the story as it's presented at trial. Is an individual deleting portions of his internet search history a guilty act depending on how things lay out? Yes, it is. I've already said that the whole story surrounding the sheath with the purchase online, the gift cards, plus him deleting Amazon internet search activity is a bad look. I don't want to pretend like it's not a bad look, but it also doesn't 100% point to guilt. And with so much information still missing from this overall story, neither does this. Among the gaps found were in the PC's event logs and system resource usage monitoring between November 11, 2022 and November 16, 2022, which Barnhart's opined was abnormal given the school was in session. Likewise, they located gaps in the PC's Chrome history during the dates where downloads occurred on the system, indicating the user was private browsing or clearing browsing history. Now, there's a large number of reasons a college student may want to remove internet search history on their computer pertaining to their education. For example, if an individual was on a website or using software that the school prohibited, this could very well be something you want removed so you don't end up getting in trouble and getting kicked out of the school. Everybody needs to understand this is a highly circumstantial case. All this depends on the story. Who's going to be the better storyteller? If, for example, during cross-examination, the defense can get up there and say, well, you analyzed a period of time between this date and you saw large gaps of history being removed. Did you look between these days and see that he had done it as well? Did you know that Bryan had OCD and he had a habit of deleting his search history for whatever reason? I mean, there's multiple ways to look at this thing. This does not mean he was Googling the address before the attacks became public. That is a jump in my opinion. And if the state wants to get up there and try to make that assumption and make that jump to the jury, then the jury's going to have to jump to reach that conclusion as well. And the farther a jury has to jump to arrive to these conclusions means there's a higher probability that this will end in a mistrial or a not guilty verdict. But there's more, so let's talk about this Michael Douglas situation. Now, this guy's a forensic accountant for the FBI. And I don't want to sit here and make the case that everything the FBI does is corrupt, they're not to be trusted, they're completely incompetent. I believe in the Karen Reed situation, the FBI did things on the up and up and they did a thorough investigation. But in this particular scenario, I'm having a hard time fully trusting the FBI given how all this IGG stuff came out. But Michael Douglas is there to testify about Bryan's spending habits. And you got to go into the notes to catch what the judge said, but this is what he said right here. For example, the disclosure notes, defendant only conducted ATM withdrawals on or after the date of the attacks and ceased using his debit card after November 10, 2022. Whereas prior to November 10th, he had regularly used his debit card. There is no indication he will attempt to opine about the reasons for the spending changes, just as they occurred. Which on the surface you would make the assumption that Bryan changed his spending habits, this is a guilty action. But when you read the footnotes, it says something different. Without more, the court has concerns about the relevance of this testimony, but defendant has not challenged it on this basis as yet. Which that's the judge throwing the defense a bone. Listen, individuals have made the case that Hippler's biased, he's unfair, this won't be a fair trial. But right here, he's given a good example of what the defense needs to challenge. He's literally saying there's issues with this testimony, you need to challenge it because I don't believe a lot of this should come in a trial. And if he was biased, I don't believe he would put that in a footnote. If he was biased, I don't believe he would sit there and drop that nugget for the defense. It does appear there will be a battle of the experts in terms of Bryan did this by himself or the multiple suspect theory. And honestly, that's how it should be. It should be a battle of the experts so the jury can determine if one person did this in such a short time frame or it did require multiple people. I've been on the multiple suspect train for some time. I've made several videos about it. I'm not going to go into all that again, but essentially the state is saying Bryan did this by himself. They conducted time tests and intend to prove at trial that it's completely possible for Bryan to do this, while the state is saying otherwise for reasons I've already listed in other videos. Now listen, here's what I'll say about all that in terms of the state's case. If they want to get up there and have somebody say that it was possible for in 2 minutes an individual to attack 4 individuals plus clean up a little bit, then okay, so be it. It's your case. Lose it if you want. And it seems that they want to indicate that this whole attack took place somewhere between 2 to 4 minutes based off Bryan's tempo and pace. They're making a lot of assumptions here. I'm not sitting here trying to make the case that this is completely impossible. I'm making the case that it's not probable. I'm making the case that they're making a lot of assumptions here between this 2 to 4 minute window plus based off Bryan's tempo and pace as if they have any idea how fast or slow he went. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, they say in the court documents they don't even know the order of this attack. They have no idea who was attacked first. And a first-degree charge with capital punishment is the highest bar to prove. So if you want to get up there and make that case, then make that case at your own peril. Because one of the big issues to me in terms of this whole particular story as it's being presented is the state is casting a very wide net here. It seems like they're laying out a very broad story, and I don't know if a broad story is going to be good enough to convince a jury that Bryan committed this crime. The judge uses the word opine a lot through a lot of these motions. And for those of y'all that don't know, the word opine basically means an opinion. And you have to ask yourself the question, are opinions good enough in this particular situation? Because there is a difference between an opinion and a fact. A fact is a statement that can be verified. It can be proven to be true or false through objective evidence. An opinion is a statement that expresses a feeling and attitude, a value, judgment, or a belief. It is a statement that is neither true nor false. So if all these experts are going to get up there and opine about what they believe the evidence to say, they're literally saying we don't know if this is true or false. Is that good enough for first degree? But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Nothing within these motions contains the one thing that all of us want to see and that a lot of us are going to need to see if we're going to believe Bryan is guilty of this crime. And that is, where is the evidence of him being in the home? I've talked about the sheath before. A lot of people say the sheath places him in the home. No, it doesn't. The sheath is a movable object. Now, the story surrounding the sheath is 100% a bad fact for Bryan. I've already said it in past videos and I'll say it again. Everybody pretending like this stuff surrounding the sheath is nonsense is being completely ignorant. But once again, it doesn't mean he committed this crime. There's so many other issues with this story. The surveillance video footage of the car seems to change. That car looks different from one image to another. The eyewitness testimony is garbage. Should it come in? It should, because she saw something. We just don't know what she saw. But she's still an eyewitness. All this circumstantial evidence can completely come in because everybody has the right to present their side of the story. But where's the evidence putting Bryan in the home? If the defense is going to present experts that are going to poke holes in the state's theory, and those experts are going to have valid opinions and valid points, how does the state combat that in a circumstantial situation where it seems like they're casting such a wide story? It seems to me a lot of these experts are going to testify about a particular situation and then make the opinion that it does seem like a guilty act. Well, in a circumstantial case, anything can be a guilty act. That's the problem here. That's one of my problems. You got to put that guy in the home. You have to put him there in the home the night of the attack. Now, if their intention is to do that through all those cell tower pings, and so be it, we'll have to see that evidence. But we've already talked in past videos about how cell tower evidence can be misleading. You can ping on one tower and be nowhere near that particular area. It's happened to a lot of us, just a lot of people don't pay attention to it. And that's the big problem with the state's case. That's the elephant in the room they don't want to talk about. Jurors are going to hear that multiple suspects could have committed this crime based off direct and indirect evidence. Jurors are going to hear that somebody tried to clean up certain areas of this crime scene in a time frame that wouldn't allow Bryan on his own to do it if he's one of the individuals who did it. Based off how all this stuff is laying out so far, I have long had the fear that law enforcement put blinders on in this particular situation. Is there probable cause to believe that Bryan has something to do with this crime? Yes, there is, because that's a sheath, and that's a sheath with his DNA, and we haven't seen the defense fight that DNA as of yet. But where's the other evidence here? Where's the evidence putting him inside the home? So much of this bombshell evidence the state is claiming to have can easily be explained away. And unless Bill Thompson's a bang-up storyteller, I don't see how this thing moves forward. We need to see something putting Bryan in the home during the night of the attack, because it will come out that those state's experts will say there was no connection between Bryan and these victims. There's no connection between Bryan and the home. And so far, we haven't seen anything putting him inside the home. Now, as always, if you see any of these things differently, you can let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoy this and a more fair, open conversation, maybe check one of these videos out. Y'all be safe now.